Alice, tu nous dis le feu vert quand c'est bon.
I just spoke to Scott. He's struggling to get in as well, but I've sent him the link just to see.
Is that okay, Alice? Are we?
Yes, everybody is coming in. So we have now 28%, 30%. So everybody can hear us.
Okay, so we just wait a few minutes so people are arriving. I understand. We just wait a few minutes to have everybody. And Annelise, I let you.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
Very good.
They even put on a white shirt for you today.
Hi, Scott. The webinar has already begun. We are waiting. People are entering into the webinar room. We are waiting for all the people being on the online.
Excellent.
Annelise, is that okay?
You can start whenever you want. For now, there are 40 people. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, good.
We got Eva on, or?
No, so Eva is over the phone with me, and she'll try to join. But if needed, we will have Eva with us over the phone.
Okay.
So I let you introduce the webinar, John and Scott.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Welcome everybody. Bonjour à tout le monde. We are still trying to recover one of our speakers who is lost in the ether, but if the worst comes to the worst, we have her on telephone, so she will be able to speak through a loudspeaker. I'd just like to give you a quick introduction to TMA, as TMA France has been in existence now for a total of 3 days. So we proudly joined the list of European chapters on the right there. We've invited Scott Stewart, who is the CEO of TMA Global, to say a few words about TMA globally. But in TMA France, now that we exist, 3 days old, we're looking forward to holding many more events of this type, and we're hoping very much to be able to hold a physical networking event in the not too distant future. Bon, pour les francophones, vous pouvez poser des questions avec le petit bouton en bas à droite, Q et R. Vous pouvez les poser en français ou en anglais comme vous voulez. So, if you want to ask any questions as we're going along, just press the Q&R button at the bottom, and you can write your questions in. So if we go on to the next slide, and I would like to hand over to Scott to talk a bit about TMA globally.
Thanks, John. Welcome everybody to the TMA Big Tent. You are part of your 14th chapter in Europe, and we're really excited to have added France. Special shout out to John Lloyd for all your tremendous efforts in advancing this and as quickly as you did, and to David Bryan, our TMA Europe president, for assisting France and supporting the effort of France to become part of the European family. TMA is an incredible organization. It is the benchmark of corporate restructuring all throughout the world. And as you can see from this slide, has the most professionally diverse demographics of any organization in the space. We are more important than we have ever been before. At TMA Global, our goal is to provide value to our membership, support of each other, and connectivity throughout our worldwide community. And we're very, very proud of our European chapters as we continue to create connectivity between the European chapters amongst themselves, as well as with TMA Global. We're proud to have France, which had long been a missing link in a powerful community of chapters. And now, dare I say, that TMA, with the inclusion of TMA France and all of the other European chapters, is and will remain the dominant force of associations in the corporate restructuring space. We are more important than ever before. We want to provide resources that help you grow your professional network and your personal brand. We're here to help and support, and we assure you that we will continue to provide the resources you need to continue to bring in members to your chapters, so that first and foremost, when your members and those of you who want to support through sponsorship of TMA Europe and your individual chapters, look to where to put your dollars. You put those behind the TMA network, because as I like to say, we are better together, and to be involved now will pay you back for the rest of your professional career with support, trust, and connectivity with each other. So thank you for having me here today, and welcome to the TMA family.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Viva France.
Thank you, Scott. So just before I introduce our speakers, I'd just like to say a few words of thanks, because TMA, as everyone knows, is a volunteer organization. So it's thanks to the volunteers that anything like this happens. And I particularly like to thank the team from DFBD, Mylène, Emily and Veronique, and the team from Derville and Lise in particular, who helped us to put this together through hours of hard work. And now I'll hand over to Mylène, who will introduce the speakers.
Thank you very much, John. So it's a pleasure to be invited to speak at this very first first TMA event in France, even if we already had an introduction before the lockdown. So first event is a webinar, and we do hope that we will have soon physical events in Paris or in any other place in France, because we have so many nice places in France. So it's an honor for me and also for all the people here from TMA France. The idea today is to describe how different member states, or still member states, react to the COVID-19 crisis, and made a comparison, especially between Germany, the UK, and France. So David Bryan, who is the co-founder and CEO of BNT, will describe I would say the English chapter. Eva Ringelspacher, Senior Manager at Restructurierungspartner in Germany, will describe the situation in Germany, and I will have the pleasure to say a few words about the French situation. So before starting, let's take a few minutes to give you a general overview over the situation in these three specific countries. We will address then specific issues with respect to how these countries adapt to the COVID-19 crisis. Just one word, do not hesitate, I would say, to interrupt with the Q&A, and please interrupt us. Please ask any question you would like to do. so that John or any one of the speaker can read the questions and actually answer live any question you may have. Do not hesitate to say in French, no problem, maybe in German too. So it's an international webinar. So overview, what's the situation in Germany? Eva, can you say a few introduction words about the situation in Germany?
Yes, sure, I will do. Thank you very much, Mylène. Yes, here in Germany, we were at the first step in January or February totally convinced that COVID-19 didn't hit Europe. And we were quite relaxed, and then we saw what happened in Italy, and we're really shocked. And then, yes, we start very early the measures and the lockdown when we close schools and shops, theaters, and so on was mid of March. This total lockdown was maybe not so heavy like, for example, in Italy or Spain. We went still to our work and went still out to be in parks or so. And the shopping areas were closed for, in the end, 4 weeks. In the same time where the lockdown started, the German government start with the first measures, with the first 8 measures for our business. When you look at the figure, how many people died here in Germany, it's still a big figure, but in comparison to other countries, we are very lucky about this figure in the end, because it's really small, and we think it's a part, or most partly, of our healthcare system. It worked really good in this phase, and it still works good. And now, starting mid of April, there was a gradual easing of restrictions. So again, the shopping area were opened. Now the kids go back to school, and what is still restricted is theaters and so on, and no big events till end of October. But at the moment, we feel a little bit that our normal life comes back.
Good, thank you, Eva. And what about the United Kingdom?
Right, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, the UK, we had a similar situation where I don't think anybody saw it coming quite as quickly as it did. But we were probably one of the slightly later ones to lock down on the 23rd of March. We've had a pretty huge death toll. I think a whole variety of reasons for that, probably, not least of which I think certainly London is a huge city and a huge melting pot of people, so a lot of international travel. And that was certainly the first place that it really took off. We've seen the infection rates and so on fall quite steadily now, and there's been a gradual easing of some of the restrictions, but I think we're all cautiously looking forward to a big step on the 4th of July, when bars and pubs and restaurants will open, a lot of other shops and services, not least of which I think there'll be a huge line of people waiting at the hairdressers. But the impact has been pretty grave on the UK. We have, April, we had a 10.4% fall in GDP. That's picked up a bit in May as certain things reopened. And our debt is now a big figure at close to 2 trillion, and bigger than GDP for the first time since 1963. So even though it feels like on the 4th of July we might be getting back to some sort of normal, quite clearly the impact of this is going to be felt for a very long time yet. That's okay.
And is everything, so I understand the release will start early July. Who was the situation? Was everything closed in the UK, or did the people have the possibility to go working even for you know, services when working at distance was possible, as in Germany, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, all essential services were kept open, and other businesses were allowed to stay open generally if they were able to comply with distancing rules and be safe. So some have. We had a client who, private equity owned, who was the owner's initial reaction was to close down, and we persuaded them not to. It has been kept going quite safely, no problems at all. And actually, I think April was possibly its best month ever. So it was quite a lot of businesses did keep going, but an awful lot, particularly consumer facing, did close.
Okay, thank you for this presentation. With respect to France, so the lockdown started mid-March, and we had a gradual easing of the restriction at the beginning of May 11th. No, we have the feeling that the reopening, the release is accelerating, because the situation with respect to the healthy measures is improving, even if we still have some clusters. So the government is still prudent, but we have a restaurant reopening, not all activities, but yes, as in Germany, I can say we have the impression that you know, life comes again. And I would say that also in French there are discrepancy between the areas, between the regions. Some parts of France were targeted as red areas because there were a lot of cases of ill people, whereas, for instance, in the west and south of France, this were green areas with less cases in numbers. The emergency period is still on, so until the end of the summer, at least with respect to insolvency proceedings and in restructuring proceedings, which is our topic today. Still, even if the situation is improving, even if firms or things are becoming awake, we will see what will happen as from the autumn to feel the real impact of the crisis. Next slide, please, Emily. Thank you very much, Emily. So here you can see the table of contents with the different topics we would like to address today. Of course, financial assistance measures. We will try to compare the reaction of our three countries. We will also talk about social measures. One overview of the situation in courts, especially with respect to the opening of restructuring and insolvency proceedings, and few words also about cross-border restructuring cases, because our organization, TMA, is an international organization, so we won't forget cross-border aspects. So first, financial assistance measures. Eva, could you please say us a few words about the massive reaction of the German government?
Yes, sure, I will do this. Yes, in March, when we had this lockdown, at the same moment, the government decided to put a lot of money in the market. It was really a lot of money, and made this economic stabilization package for small, mid, and really large companies. there were two main lines to receive aid from the state. It's by KfW Bank, it's in German, Kreditanstalt für Wiederaufbau. It's a state-owned bank, and they provided so-called Corona loans, and for all business. And this bank has a risk assumption of 80%. So companies have to find a bank which provides a credit, a loan, and for this bank only there was a risk at 20%, and the rest, the 80%, was in the risk assumption of KfW. And then it's always a big issue if you have to apply for such credits, and then they recognize that the application must be faster, and that not so much information must be pulled together. So, you know, in Germany we have this restructuring opinion. It's very near to an independent business review, but it's a standard. And it was clear then after 1 or 2 weeks that you cannot provide such a restructuring opinion in 2 weeks or so. Normally the minimum is 2 or 3 months for such an opinion. So the KfW Bank provided a fast credit. I really, it's called Schnellkredit in Germany, so very fast, 100% risk assumption. And so the companies go to the bank, said, I would like to apply for such a fast credit, and the bank go directly to KfW, and the decision was made. It's 100% risk assumption. Nevertheless, all the processes are not so quick and fast as we would like to.
Eva, one question. Who decides to grant the credit? The bank, the commercial bank, in contact with the firm, or the KfW bank?
In the first, the normal Corona loans, it's the KfW bank. In this fast credit procedure, it's a commercial bank, and then the KfW only make the decision, yes, we will pay. And the second line to receive money is that your normal commercial bank gave a loan to the company, and but they receive for this loan a guarantee from the federal states, or in large cases from the state.
Okay.
And maybe you saw the discussion in the press regarding our airline Lufthansa. This was a very large case, and today we hope we find a decision at Lufthansa. But there was again then really rescue and restructuring for this exceptional large cases.
Yeah, we heard today, if I'm not wrong, 8 billion euros a loan granted to Lufthansa, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay, and one question again: if the German firm is eligible to receive this guaranteed loan, i.e., if the firm fulfill all criteria set in the EU law or in the German law, I don't know if it has been introduced in German law, is it automatic to receive that loan, or is the bank allowed to refuse to grant a loan if it considers that for any reason, if the bank considers that the company has no means enough, that the future of the company is not insured?
Yes, yes, sure. And I personally had one case. We made a restructuring opinion last November. The company was on the way to a turnaround, and then Corona crisis comes up and they have to close for 4 weeks. And then we try to get a state guarantee. And the problem is that you only receive a state guarantee if the company was not in a crisis at the end of 2019. And the crisis comes up in March with Corona. And the problem here we saw was there was already a restructuring opinion in place. And the feedback from the federal state was, no, sorry, not for restructuring cases, even not for such cases who are on a good way to the turnaround. So we make then a second try to receive maybe such a Corona loan from KfW. But in the meanwhile, in the discussion, the company said, oh no, we don't want overload the company with loans. And last Friday, they filed for insolvency.
Okay.
Eva, we have a question for you.
Yes.
In Germany, what is the amount of the credits guaranteed by the KfW relating to companies? In other words, is there a limit in terms of percentage of turnover or any other criterion?
Yes, it's a percentage of the turnover, it's a percentage of EBITDA, and then you have various clusters if this is a small company, a mid company, or a large company.
Okay. Thank you, Eva. Maybe we will switch to David to have an overview of the situation in the UK with respect to financial measures.
Okay. Set out a variety of things there in this little table. I won't try and sort of read through them because that will be very boring for you and you can read them yourselves. But there are essentially 4 main loan schemes. The top one is for large investment grade businesses, so that works pretty well. There's no great risk involved, just buying up commercial paper, as it says. The next 2 are the business, coronavirus business interruption loan schemes, one large and one for more medium-sized businesses. They're both broadly similar, one for, with firms with sales more than £45 million, the other for less than. Various terms there. These are all being handled through the normal banks, a variety of them in the UK. There is an 80% government guarantee on those loans. So the banks are still taking 20% of the risk, and therefore started out going through, I think a bit like Germany, going through the full credit assessment procedure, so on and so forth, which was incredibly slow, and money just simply wasn't being moved out to businesses that needed it. That's been, I think, streamlined a bit now. They've also tackled certain issues about whether personal guarantees could be asked for from the directors or shareholders. So it's all got a little bit better, but it does still take a while. It's the bank's decision ultimately, but I think gradually that has settled down, and most businesses that think they need such loans are by and large getting them now. The last one came about as the 4th one there, the bounce back loan scheme was the last of them to be started. And in response to a lot of small businesses saying that the other schemes weren't working for very small businesses. So this was brought in. It is, as it says, maximum of £50,000 for a business, 25% of sales limit. Again, through the banks, but with 100% government guarantee this time. So the banks are not taking any risk. There is no real credit assessment at all. It is self-certified. It's a very quick application process online. It takes about 30 minutes. And normally you will get the money within a few days. So it's very quick. as it says, up to 6 years, 2.5% interest, and an interest and repayment holiday for 12 months. It's really been a huge success, if you want to call it that. Last figures I saw, 921,000 businesses had applied for loans on this scheme. The amount loaned is close to £30 billion, and it is increasing at a rate of around 2 billion a week. So that's a huge scheme. And I think the big questions around it, though, are, is it too easy? Will they be repaid? There was a survey done, I think, last week where 43% of businesses who'd taken such loans were asked about it and said they didn't think they would be able to repay them. So that's going to be interesting when it happens. I think quite a lot of restructuring work there. And of course, there's some risk of fraud as well. So all of those are concerns. And then the bottom two, we have an investment fund for high growth businesses the government's put out. You have to have a matching private investment, but the aim is to try and target certain very high growth companies and make sure that they see their way through this. And then a whole variety of grants and reliefs on property tax for the retail, leisure and hospitality businesses, deferral of VAT payments, and a bit of specific state aid for certain industries or sectors. So that's about it for a very quick summary of the financial assistance measures.
And one question, David, thank you for this, but I understand that for small firms, basically, or if you need a small amount, it can be made quickly. But for the biggest firms that need, certain or massive amount of loans, you say it takes a lot of time. Is there any possibility to have things accelerated, for instance, with an intervention of the government, of the ministry? Is it similar to France? Are there specific public entities which can assist firms in their restructurings?
I think the government, I think, has already intervened and taken away some of the personal guarantee issues. I think they've encouraged the banks to be quicker, and as I understand it, that depends a bit on exactly who's asking and for how much, but I think it has got a lot quicker than when it first started out a couple of months or more ago. So it's a reasonably quick process, but probably you're still looking at a week to 3 weeks, maybe, depending on exactly what's required. But I think, it's a balance, isn't it? I mean, you want to try and make it easy, but then where they have for the very small loans, those bounce back loans, there's a lot of concern now that they've made it too easy and too quick. So.
Okay, thank you. Maybe just a few words about France. I can see that we have a lot of participants from France, so I will be quick because I'm sure a lot of you know this by heart now, that in France the government has put in place several funding tools, if I can say that, among which the state guaranteed loans, it is prêt garanti par l'État, or PGE. The PGE is a loan guaranteed up to 90% of its amount by the state, except for very big firms, but mainly it's up to 90% guarantee in amount of the loan. As in Germany, the amounts that an undertaking can borrow depends on certain thresholds, basically the size of the firm. It was in France a very, very ambitious program. They announced, if I'm not wrong, 300 billion euros at the beginning of the lockdown. I guess it was for all financial measures together, not only PGEs, but as as in the UK, there are several loans or tools available to companies. I will just speak about PGEs, but the amount was huge. We had the first statistics, I would say, 2 weeks ago, and we heard that approximately 100 billion euros have been borrowed to approximately 500,000 firms, which is already quite good, but you can see that measures or fundings can still be granted to firms. It's not the end, I guess. As in your countries, the decision is taken by the bank only, the decision to grant money or not. And actually, this was one of the concerns for firms in trouble. As for your case, Eva, this is one of the big issue we face here in France as insolvency lawyers, insolvency practitioners, meaning that firms that are in trouble, potentially which were already in insolvency proceedings as from the beginning of the year, or which went out of the insolvency proceeding but subject to a plan, a rescheduling of the debt. These firms have in theory access to PGEs because they are eligible according to the European and French criteria, but in practice, some banks are really reluctant to grant the money to these firms, and they refuse to grant money. So it is as if these firms were condemned twice, a second time, and again we need to struggle to fight to find alternative solutions, alternative funding. So it's a really hard situation for firms in difficulties, firms in restructuring, or which made a restructuring but are still weak. However, there are alternative fundings granted directly by the state, and I will just mention a very recent decree, a law enacted on June the 12th, creating a new funding, a new loan from the state, especially for firms which faced a refusal to get a PGE. So now it was a big part, these financial measures. We will try to be a little bit quicker with respect to the other chapters. Again, do not hesitate to ask questions. Social measures. Eva, I let you start with Germany.
Okay, thank you. So what we see here is this short time allowance. So it's really a reduction of the labor costs, and this had really a high leverage on the cases. So I remember beginning of May, it was Monday morning, I was sitting over one case looking at the liquidity, and there was really much liquidity in the company. So normally the company has a loan about 2 million. And then I saw it was not used, this loan. They didn't need it. And my first reaction was I called the colleagues and told them there must be something wrong. And then case 2 and 3 came up. And then I recognized this liquidity is so much better because you have not the labor costs. Because in Germany, the labor costs are really the most, in proportion, looking the biggest costs of the company. And when you must not pay such cost, then you have really a good liquidity situation. And the second step is you can ask for a reimbursement of social security contributions, and you can have tax deferrals. but some companies didn't use this tax deferrals. But because why? When you have an application for a deferral started in early March, you know that now in July you must pay, because it's only a deferral. So the last point here on the slide was not so used, and some cases where the company was already in a crisis, they even pay no taxes. So this was not a possibility to get more money. But when we look, for example, reduction of labor costs, there was still in some cases the scenario of a plan B. The business says, okay, we can use this short-term allowance, or do we want to make a restructuring in an insolvency? Because in Germany, if you apply or file for insolvency, the first 3 months of this insolvency, you receive the labor costs from the Federal Employment Agency. So sometimes there was the decision, no, we don't use the short-term allowance. We try to make a restructuring, but in the insolvency, and use then the advantage.
Okay, insolvency still is an option.
Yes.
Thank you, Eva. What about the UK, David?
Okay, well, we've had no actual changes to employment law as such, but the big thing has been what is known as the furlough scheme, which pays wages up to 80% of the wages, max to 2,500 a month. But interestingly, for those not working at all, so if you were working, somebody was working part-time, they weren't eligible for that. They actually had to be laid off. It's been another huge uptake. Last count I heard, around about 9 million people are on that scheme. It has, in the first few months, cost about £20 billion. And by October, when it tapers out, it's expected to have cost about 80 billion. So it's a big expense for the government. Part-time working is going to be allowed from July, so that's deliberately, I think, intended to ease people back into employment, to work as the lockdown lifts. And the scheme itself tapers out from August, with the employer having to pay a greater and greater part of the, so it comes down from 80%. There's also things like support for sick pay. There's a grant scheme for the self-employed who were otherwise missed by all the wage support. And also we're not short of guidance on distancing and safety measures as businesses restart. But, you know, a big push to try and make sure that we keep employees safe in whatever they're doing, and where it's public facing, keep the public safe as well. Mm. So even though things like bars and restaurants are going to open 4th of July, I think we're going to see some very different places to what we were used to before.
Okay, thank you, David. In France, we had, of course, also this short time working. The question now in France is what will happen next? So once we have a easing, an end of the lockdown, will the part-time working continue? The government recently enacted legal decrees, other laws. It was a law, sorry, in order to maintain this measure, the specific short-time working measure for firms which continues being in serious trouble. So depending on the category, we have now a list of categories, of areas, of sector of activity in which firms will be eligible. We do not have the decree of application, so we do not know exactly the conditions, but firms that are concerned can be already aware that they can continue using the very, very favorable part-time working regime. at some point it has been discussed in France whether the public social organism would condition the benefit of short-time working to a commitment of the employer not to make any redundancy during a certain period of time. It has been discussed, but to my opinion, it has not been enacted, applied, at least for the time being, and I'm not sure it will be the case. So good thing for the employers to have some flexibility. And one last word about the functioning of workers' council in firms. My experience was that it was pretty good in the majority of the firms. The consultation process continued to go on by video conference or conference calls. So a lot of pragmatism and flexibility in the majority of the firms. Third topics. What about the situation in insolvency courts? Eva.
Yes, how should I say, the filing for insolvency if a company is illiquidity is, how should I say, on holiday. So till end of September, a company who is illiquid must not file for insolvency. The problem is that most companies, and here at the thinking about it, they read this new law, this COVID-19 AG, which is a new insolvency legislation, especially for the COVID-19 crisis, to suspend the obligation for file for insolvency, and it was in all papers. And the fear is at the moment that many companies, the management says, oh, that's quite fine. There's no filing for insolvency at the moment. And it's together with a suspension of the obligation, with extensive relief from liability for management, for board members, and creditors associated with company. But when you really look at this new legislation, you will read, yes, you must not file for insolvency if your company was quite in a good shape end of last year, so no crisis, and in 2019, and at the moment you are looking for a financing to solve your problem till end of September. So we are quite convinced that we will see some wave of insolvencies in Germany, because at the moment it's quite, but we are very convinced we will see a wave of insolvencies starting in October. And the fear is that these companies who filed them are really near to a liquidation. So there is not really then enough time or hope to make a restructuring in an insolvency case. There is a possibility to prolong this suspension till spring next year, but all experts, we say, please do not prolong this, because it would be even a bigger issue when this suspension would end in end of March next year. So this is what we see at the moment. It's really good to have such a suspension, to give companies the chance to need the time now and get a financing. But we are quite convinced here in Germany, a lot of companies use it and they know that they will not get a financing.
Okay, so the more you wait and the worse the situation will be for the company anyway, they are already condemned, if I would say, to stop their activity at some point.
Yes.
Okay. And David, in English courts.
Okay, well, our courts are largely operating remotely, and no great problems. Ongoing restructurings and new filings are all quite possible. Nothing to actually stop them as such. But demand's been very low. April and May insolvencies were down, as it says, about 33%. And those were already low levels in the previous year. We'd not seen that higher level of insolvency filings. So, and if you look again at what's those that have actually filed, a lot of them are businesses that were in difficulty before the crisis. I mean, particularly retail, we've seen quite a number of retail filings. One of the other reasons why demand is down is there's really been no enforcement. For whatever reasons, the banks are not pushing too hard at the moment. They're waiting to see what happens. And other creditors, non-financial creditors, have had some of their normal procedures put on hold for, in particular, winding up petitions, which was a way for a supplier to go to court and force a company to either pay or go into insolvency. They've been temporarily suspended. So a combination of that sort of thing, and businesses just surviving with the government assistance that's available, and many of them, I think, unwinding their working capital positions. They've had some money coming in from customers, but and more than they've been paying out. So they've survived. But I think, again, we all think that can't go on for too long. We also relaxed the laws a bit on directors' liabilities, but only slightly. We left all the one bit, and all the other conditions have remained. So I think it was more to try and stop people filing too soon than to stop them filing at all. But I think most of the turnaround, restructuring, insolvency profession is expecting a big increase in distress around Q3, Q4 this year, the back end of the year, as things start to get tough for those businesses. I mean, particularly, I think, as a lot of people are discovering, starting up is in many cases a lot more difficult than shutting down. And you're going to need some working capital. You've probably going to have to work at a lower level of activity than previously. So exactly how are you going to do that? And that's going to put a lot of stress on a lot of businesses.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thank you, David. I see the time is going very quickly. I will try to be short. Maybe we will take 5 minutes more because we started a little bit late. So with respect to the situation in French courts, we had a legal freeze in the duty to file for the opening of insolvency proceedings in France starting on March the 12th. But it does not mean that we do not have any possibility to open insolvency proceedings. It's just purely voluntary. If, as you said, Eva, insolvency can still be an option for certain firms. The ones which could not have a PGE or which did not want it to have a PGE, which have no money to advance the payment of the wages, even if we had a short time working, this has to be advanced by the company and later on reimbursed by the social organism. So sometimes we had to file for insolvency proceedings in order to have, as in Germany, wages paid, advanced upfront by the state organism. That's as contrary to the UK. I understand creditors abstain from filing for insolvency proceeding. They have the possibility in the UK. In France, they do not have anymore the possibility. The insolvency proceedings can only be opened by the debtor itself. One of the consequences of the freeze in the duty is that certain restructuring tools, such as mandat d'hoc, conciliation, safeguard proceedings, are also available to debtors which are insolvent, in a state of cessation of payment. So basically, there is a large a large possibility, many tools available for a firm to define and implement its restructuring, which is quite an advantage for firms in France. And as in your countries, we do also expect an increase in insolvency, in opening of insolvency proceedings in the autumn. My impression is that it's already starts. I heard that in many insolvency practitioner offices, they are really busy, increasingly busy. There are major cases of insolvency in France, especially in the retail industry. So maybe it will start earlier than expected. Let's wait and see. Few words about cross-border restructuring.
Okay, I look at my watch and see we have no time so far left.
Take 5 minutes to say the key points.
Yes, I think it's navigating, as I write here, through the European government aid measures. For example, we have one mandate. It's a travel agency, a huge travel agency. The holding is sitting in Germany, and we look at this structure and recognize we are talking about more than 10 jurisdictions worldwide. And then we try to find out what are the government aid measures in Germany, for example, in France, in UK, even in Japan and Australia. And then we try to say what would be here the best way. And in the end, it was really important to have a clarity on the current situation of the company, but also develop some measures for this crisis. And look, when you develop these measures at the same point in time, in which legal entity we are now at the moment. And I think this would be really a case which is for the future, which we will see in the future more often. And so the question is, how can we solve it and bring all this European government aid measures together in one company in the end to bring them forward?
Yeah, sure. And David, just one key point for you for cross-border restructurings. Oh no, sorry. I guess I'm not. It was. I will just say one word for France. Sorry, you were just wanting to say to speak on other topics. Just with respect to France, one word. Maybe one recommendation for groups of company. I have seen several times since the beginning of the crisis a restructuring strategy being defined at the level of the parent company. So a research for fundings at the level of the parent company. To my opinion, it should not prevent directors in the subsidiaries to define alternative solutions, plan B, and maybe start also try to have fundings in their country, because in case of failure of the plan A, their liability could be engaged if they have done nothing, all the more taking into consideration the massive financial assistance provided in each member state. Yeah, sorry, David, you just wanted to say a word about the future, right?
Yeah, I think with the UK, well, the big item, you know, big news for us is these new insolvency laws which are going through Parliament at the moment. In fact, last I've heard, it might actually pass into law tomorrow. These are based on the EU directive, which is mildly ironic given that we're leaving, but very Chapter 11 light that they seem to be aimed at, and brought forward very fast as a result of the coronavirus. I won't go into any detail. I mean, you could do an hour's webinar just on this stuff. But there's three major bits: the pre-insolvency moratorium, a new restructuring plan, a bit like the scheme of arrangement, but with some useful differences, like not having the absolute priority rule. Instead, it's a comparison to next best alternative. And companies, creditors that are out of the money do not have a vote. So it's a very flexible tool. And it'll be interesting to see how that all works out. It is available to overseas companies. I think an interesting, just a thought from us. I mean, we recently worked just in the, this was pre-crisis and going in, and through the early part of it, we were advising a English subsidiary of a French company, and ultimately had to put that subsidiary into liquidation. I think our feeling is that if these laws had been enacted at the time, we could have avoided that and saved it. It would have been able to work its way through those difficulties and reach an agreement with its creditors. So I think very interesting how it might work in future. If you want to know more about it, all the large UK law firms have published big documents going into all the detail. So just go to any of them, you'll find it somewhere on their website. Also, I put a link there to TMA UK chapter's article on the what it's known as the Corporate Insolvency and Governance Bill. So do please have a look at that if you wish as well. It's a slightly less legalistic look at it.
Thank you, David. This is very useful that you give us the link. Very interesting. We'll make the presentation available. Let's check with John how we can do on the TMA website. But this is quite ironic that the bill is based on the European directive. I heard that London refused again to postpone the transition period. So we will have an increasing complexity of cross-border restructuring involving the UK in the future. Unless we have a very good bilateral agreement on the restructuring part. But I'm sure we will increasingly need your services, David, as from the Alton. Thank you very much for all of this. I will just let Véronique Dobel, who is a member of the board of the TMA in France, and I have the pleasure, she's also my partner, to say some words to conclude the webinar. So Véronique, I let you the word, the final word.
Thank you very much, Mylène. Thank you to Eva and David for these very interesting insights. And so I understand that the reaction of each state was rapid. The devices, the tools are available for the companies which want to preserve the cash above all. And we can see that the state guarantee loans operate. There is a question which arises soon, I think, is the legal qualification and of these states' loans at the European level. And in France, I wanted to add that also the credit insurance has been supported by the state, which is essential to maintain the business. I have also heard that in Germany, the rate of VAT has been reduced, which helps the economy. And for the time being, we can see that there is not a big increase of the number of bankruptcies because there is no legal obligation to file insolvency, as we have heard in Germany and in France. In the coming months, the business plans will be reviewed and will be based on more precise data on the resumption of activity. The big question remains the repayment of bank debt guarantees by the states, And this question will arise, of course, in the coming months. Maybe we can also think that the management of the event of the default in the covenants, in the credit agreements, will be also a subject in this particular period. Maybe I would like to point out also that the notion of a group that operates in the set of companies we are in good health is a big question when the difficulties arise, and refer to the interests of each member of the company, and the notion of group is disappearing because the difficulties are analyzed in each company. And so maybe we should be very careful about intra-group cash management agreements, which can put certain entities in default when the borrowers cannot repay the funds. This implies, I think, the reviewing in all M&A process. The sellers will have to mention in the due diligence all the levels that they have put in place to keep the company in good health. And the buyer have the right to insist on the further control on the business. So I think that vigilance and insolvency test is required for all these companies weakened by this crisis. In France, the confidential system for the preventive treatment of difficulties, as you mentioned, ad hoc mandate, conciliation, remains the reference tool for dealing with difficulties. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much to all the people participating to that webinar. And we hope that it was interesting for all of you.
Thank you, Véronique. Thank you to all speakers, and above all, thank you to all the participants for being here with us today. And you are most welcome at the TMA France. We do hope we will see you very, very soon during our next events. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.